The envelope sat on Dr. Phil's desk, white and official looking, the kind of envelope that had been opened thousands of times on this stage over the years. DNA results, paternity tests, the scientific answer to questions that had torn families apart, that had created years of doubt and accusation and pain. Usually, the envelope contained straightforward answers. Yes, he's the father, or no, he's not. Clear, definitive. Case closed. What nobody in that studio knew on this particular Thursday afternoon was that the envelope sitting on Dr. Phil's desk contained an answer that wasn't straightforward at all. An answer that would expose a betrayal so profound, so fundamentally devastating, that it would require Dr. Phil to stop the show entirely and call for emergency intervention. An answer that involved not one family secret, but a biological complication that made the truth both scientifically certain and impossibly ambiguous at the same time. Mark Thompson sat in one of the burgundy leather chairs, his jaw tight, his hands gripping the armrests. 35 years old, married for 5 years to Jennifer, father, or so he'd thought, to 2-year-old Connor. Beside him sat Jennifer, 33, her face a mixture of defiance and fear, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. They were there because Mark had demanded a paternity test for Connor, because he suspected Jennifer had been unfaithful, because he needed to know the truth. What Mark didn't know yet was that the truth would be worse than anything he'd imagined, not just because of the affair itself, but because of who Jennifer had the affair with. Before we dive into what happened when that envelope was opened, let me know in the comments where you're watching from today. If you believe that some betrayals cut deeper than others, that family bonds can be both the strongest connections we have and the ones that hurt us most when they're broken, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about the moments when DNA reveals truths that change everything. Now, let's go back to that Thursday afternoon and discover what happened when science confirmed a betrayal that should have been impossible. Dr. Phil had been working through the background of the case for about 20 minutes. The marriage had been struggling, Mark explained. Financial stress, communication issues, the normal challenges of early parenthood. And then David had come to visit. David, Mark's identical twin brother, the person he'd shared everything with from the moment they were born. A womb, a childhood, a face, even their DNA. David lived across the country now, but when Mark had mentioned the marriage was going through a rough patch, David had offered to come stay for a few weeks, to help out, to give them someone to talk to who cared about both of them. And did it help? Dr. Phil asked. Having David there? Mark's expression darkened. I thought so at the time. Jennifer seemed happier, less stressed. But now looking back, I realize... He stopped, couldn't finish the sentence. Jennifer spoke for the first time since sitting down. I made a terrible mistake. I'm not denying that. But Mark won't even consider the possibility that Connor is his son. He won't even look at him anymore. Because I know what I saw, Mark said, his voice rising. I came home early one day and I saw you and David. I saw how you looked at each other. And then Connor was born, and he doesn't even look like me, and... He's 2 years old, Jennifer interrupted. He's barely old enough to look like anyone. Dr. Phil held up his hand. Let's talk about what you saw, Mark. What exactly did you see between Jennifer and David? Mark took a breath, steadying himself. I saw them in our kitchen, standing close, too close. And when I walked in, they jumped apart like they had been caught doing something. Jennifer said they were just talking, but I knew. I knew something was wrong. And did you confront David about this? He denied everything, said I was being paranoid, that the stress was making me see things that weren't there. But then I started noticing other things, text messages, Jennifer being secretive with her phone. And when Connor was born, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Dr. Phil turned to Jennifer. Jennifer, I need you to be completely honest right now. Did you have an affair with David? The studio went very quiet. Everyone watching could see the answer on Jennifer's face before she spoke. Yes, she whispered. It started about a year before Connor was born. David was staying with us and Mark was working such long hours and David was just there. He listened. He understood. And one night it just happened. Mark made a sound that was somewhere between a laugh and a sob. My own brother. My twin brother. It wasn't supposed to keep happening. Jennifer said, and she was crying now. It was supposed to be one mistake, but it did keep happening. For months. And then I found out I was pregnant, and I didn't know. I couldn't know for sure. Whether it was mine or my brother's, Mark finished for her, his voice flat. Subscribe and leave a comment because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. Dr. Phil looked at the envelope on his desk. That's why we're here today, to find out the truth. Mark, you requested this paternity test to determine whether Connor is your biological son. I need to know, Mark said. I can't move forward, can't make any decisions until I know the truth. Dr. Phil picked up the envelope, but before opening it, he looked at both of them seriously. Before we look at these results, I need to make sure you both understand something. Mark, you and David are identical twins. Do you know what that means scientifically? Mark frowned. We have the same DNA. We look the same. Exactly, Dr. Phil said. You have identical DNA, which means that a standard paternity test can confirm whether Connor is genetically related to you, but it cannot distinguish between you and David. Do you understand what I'm saying? The color drained from Mark's face. What? Identical twins share the exact same genetic code, Dr. Phil explained. So if Connor's DNA matches yours, it also matches David's. The test can tell us if Connor is genetically the child of a Thompson twin, but it cannot tell us which Thompson twin. Jennifer's hands flew to her mouth. Mark just stared at Dr. Phil, the implication slowly sinking in. So you're saying, even after we do the test, we still might not know? That's exactly what I'm saying, Dr. Phil confirmed. The science can't give us a definitive answer about which twin is Connor's biological father, because genetically, you and David are the same person. But this is the moment no one in the studio, and no one watching at home, ever saw coming. Dr. Phil opened the envelope and read the results silently, his expression growing more serious. Then he looked up at Mark and Jennifer. The DNA test confirms that Connor is genetically the son of a Thompson twin. The genetic markers match. But as I explained, the test cannot distinguish between Mark and David as the biological father. Mark's voice was hollow. So I still don't know. Even with the test, I still don't know if Connor is my son. Dr. Phil set the paper down carefully. Mark, I need to ask you something. During the time when Connor would have been conceived, were you and Jennifer still intimate? Mark hesitated. Yes. Not as often as before, but yes. And Jennifer, were you intimate with both Mark and David during that time? Jennifer nodded miserably. Yes. The studio was completely silent. The audience sat frozen, understanding the impossibility of the situation. A child who would never know his biological father because science literally could not tell the difference between his potential fathers. Dr. Phil's voice was gentle but firm. This is where I need to do something I don't usually do. Mark, I need David here for this conversation. Is he available? He's actually... Mark swallowed hard. He's here, in Los Angeles. He flew in for the results. Dr. Phil looked at his producers. Can we bring David to the stage? Within minutes, a man who looked exactly like Mark walked onto the stage. Same height, same build, same face. David Thompson. The audience made a collective sound of recognition. Seeing the identical twins side by side made the situation somehow more real, more devastating. David sat in the empty chair, not looking at his brother. The two men were mirror images of each other, and the silence between them was heavy with betrayal. David, Dr. Phil said, are you aware that Jennifer had an affair with you while married to your brother? Yes, David said quietly. I'm aware. I'm the one she had the affair with. I know what I did. And did you know that Connor might be your biological son? I suspected. Jennifer told me she was pregnant, and I knew. I knew the timing meant he could be mine. Mark finally looked at his brother, and his voice was shaking when he spoke. We shared everything growing up, David. Everything. We were best friends. We told people we had our own language when we were kids, remember? We finished each other's sentences. We knew what the other was thinking. And you, his voice broke. You did this. You slept with my wife. David's hands were shaking. I know what I did, and I'm not going to sit here and make excuses. I fell in love with her, Mark. I know that doesn't make it okay. But I need you to know it wasn't just physical. I love her. The words landed like a bomb. Mark stood up so fast his chair tipped backward. You love her? You love my wife? The mother of a child who you helped create while betraying me? And you think that makes it better? It makes it true, David said, and there were tears on his face now too. I love her more than... He stopped, but the implication hung in the air. More than you do. Dr. Phil stood up, his voice cutting through the rising tension. Stop. Both of you, stop right there. He turned to his producers in the control booth. I need family therapists here immediately, and clear the audience. This is not something that should happen in front of cameras. The audience began filing out, confused but compliant. The cameras kept rolling, but the red lights dimmed. This had become something else entirely, not entertainment, but a family crisis unfolding in real time. When the studio was cleared, except for essential personnel and 2 therapists who'd been brought in, Dr. Phil addressed all 3 of them, Mark, Jennifer, and David, sitting in a semicircle. Here's what we know, Dr. Phil said. Connor is genetically the son of a Thompson twin, but the science cannot tell us which twin. Jennifer, you were intimate with both brothers during the conception window, so even you can't know for certain, which means Connor will never know his biological father. That's the scientific reality. He paused, letting that settle. But here's what I need all 3 of you to understand. Fatherhood isn't just biology. Being a father is about who shows up. Who's there at 3 in the morning when the baby is crying? Who changes diapers and goes to doctor's appointments and teaches him to tie his shoes and reads him bedtime stories? Mark, you've been doing those things for 2 years. Biologically, Connor might be David's son, but you've been his father. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. Mark's voice was raw. But how am I supposed to look at him and not wonder? How am I supposed to see David's face in my son's features and not think about what they did? That's a question only you can answer, Dr. Phil said, and it's going to require intensive therapy, probably for months or years. But I want you to think about something. Connor is 2 years old. He doesn't know anything about DNA tests or affairs or biological fathers. He knows one father, you. The question isn't whether you're his biological father. The question is whether you're going to continue being his father, whether you choose to be. He turned to David. And you. You need to understand something. Jennifer may have participated in this affair, but you betrayed your brother, your twin brother, the person who shared your entire life. That's a betrayal that goes beyond just the affair itself. You destroyed a trust that was built over 35 years, and then you have the audacity to sit here and say you love her more than he does? David's head dropped. I didn't mean... Yes, you did, Dr. Phil said. You meant exactly what you said. And that tells me this isn't just about an affair. This is about competition between brothers. This is about you wanting what Mark has and taking it. The session continued for another 2 hours, off camera, with the therapists working through the immediate crisis. Jennifer admitted she didn't know which brother was Connor's biological father and might never know. David admitted his feelings for Jennifer, but also his devastation at destroying his relationship with his twin. Mark admitted he didn't know if he could stay married to Jennifer or maintain any relationship with David. The episode that eventually aired was edited carefully. It showed the setup, Mark's suspicions, the request for a paternity test, the revelation about David. It showed the DNA results and the explanation that identical twins share DNA so completely that the test couldn't distinguish between them. And it showed the beginning of the confrontation between the brothers before Dr. Phil stopped the show and cleared the studio. But the episode ended with something unusual. Dr. Phil speaking directly to the camera about what happened after the cameras stopped. What you just witnessed was a family in crisis, Dr. Phil said. A crisis that involves betrayal, yes, but also a biological reality that makes resolution complicated. Mark and David are identical twins. They share DNA so completely that Connor's paternity test matched both of them equally. Science cannot tell us which brother is Connor's biological father, and that means Connor will grow up never knowing that answer. He paused. After the cameras stopped, we spent hours with Mark, Jennifer, and David, working with therapists to begin addressing this crisis. I want to tell you what's happened since then, because I think it's important for people to understand that these situations don't have neat, simple resolutions. The screen showed text updates as Dr. Phil spoke. Mark filed for divorce from Jennifer 3 weeks after this taping. The divorce is pending. Mark has maintained custody of Connor and continues to be his primary caregiver. Jennifer sees Connor regularly through a custody arrangement. David and Jennifer are currently in a relationship, but according to Jennifer, it's struggling under the weight of how it started. Mark and David have not spoken since this taping. Mark is in individual therapy. Jennifer is in individual therapy. David is in individual therapy, and all three are supposed to be in family therapy together, though David has attended only once. Dr. Phil looked directly at the camera. Here's what I want you to understand. Mark is raising Connor. Not because we know for certain that Connor is biologically his son. We don't know that and might never know it. Mark is raising Connor because he's been Connor's father for 2 years, and he made the choice to continue being Connor's father. That's what fatherhood really is. It's not just biology. It's choice. It's commitment. It's showing up every day, even when it's hard. David wanted Jennifer. He got Jennifer. But the relationship is built on a foundation of betrayal and lies, and according to Jennifer, they're both discovering that a relationship that starts by destroying another relationship isn't stable. That's what happens when you build something on broken trust. And Jennifer is living with the consequences of her choices. A failed marriage, a complicated custody arrangement, and the knowledge that her son will never know who his biological father is because she was intimate with identical twins during the same time period. The response to the episode was immediate and overwhelming. The clip of Dr. Phil explaining that identical twins share DNA so completely that a paternity test couldn't distinguish between them went viral, shared millions of times, with many people expressing shock that they'd never realized this biological reality. But more than the scientific fascination, what struck people was the profound question Dr. Phil had asked: which of you will actually be Connor's father? The distinction between biological fatherhood and chosen fatherhood resonated with millions of viewers. Adoptive fathers, stepfathers, fathers raising children who might not be biologically theirs. Dr. Phil received thousands of letters. Many were from people in similar situations, not necessarily involving identical twins, but involving questions of paternity and what it means to be a father beyond just biology. But the letters that stayed with him were from identical twins themselves, writing about the unique betrayal of a twin sleeping with a sibling's spouse. One letter, which Dr. Phil kept in his desk drawer, was from a man who wrote, "I'm an identical twin. My brother and I have been best friends our entire lives. We joke that we share a brain. Reading about Mark and David broke my heart because I cannot imagine my brother doing that to me. We share DNA, but that should make us protect each other more, not betray each other. Thank you for holding David accountable. Identical twins have a bond that most people don't understand, and David violated that bond in the worst possible way." Mark, Jennifer, and David came back to the show 1 year later for a follow-up segment. The update was sobering. Mark and Jennifer's divorce had been finalized. Mark had primary custody of Connor, who was now 3 years old and thriving. Jennifer had visitation rights and saw Connor regularly. David and Jennifer were no longer together. The relationship fell apart, Jennifer admitted to Dr. Phil during the follow-up. "We tried to make it work, but we couldn't get past how it started. Every argument, every difficult moment came back to the fact that we destroyed Mark's trust. And we started not trusting each other. If I could cheat on Mark with David, could I cheat on David with someone else? If David could betray his twin brother, what else was he capable of? We couldn't build anything real on that foundation." David looked broken during the follow-up. "I lost everything. I lost my brother. I lost Jennifer. I don't even know if Connor is my biological son, but I've lost any chance of being his father anyway. Mark won't let me near him, and I understand why. I destroyed the most important relationship in my life for something that didn't even last." Mark's update was different. He spoke about therapy, about learning to separate his anger at Jennifer and David from his love for Connor. "I don't know if Connor is biologically mine," he said. "The DNA test can't tell me that, but I've realized something through all this therapy. It doesn't matter. Connor is my son because I choose to be his father. I'm the one who's there every morning and every night. I'm the one he calls Dada. I'm the one he runs to when he's scared. That's what makes me his father. Not DNA. Choice. Dr. Phil asked Mark about his relationship with David. Have you spoken to your brother at all this year? No, Mark said flatly. I don't know if I ever will. Some people say I should forgive him for Connor's sake, that Connor deserves to know his uncle. But David isn't just some guy who hurt me. He's my identical twin. We shared everything from the moment we were conceived, and he chose to betray me in the most intimate way possible. That's not something I know how to forgive. He paused. Maybe someday, but not now, not yet. Dr. Phil turned to the audience. I want to talk about what this situation teaches us. First, the biological reality. If you're involved with an identical twin and there's any question of paternity, understand that standard DNA testing cannot distinguish between identical twins as potential fathers. The science just doesn't work that way. They share the exact same genetic code. Second, and more importantly, this situation illustrates something crucial about fatherhood. Mark is raising Connor not because science confirmed Connor is his biological son. Science couldn't confirm that. Mark is raising Connor because he chose to continue being Connor's father. And that choice, that commitment, is what actually defines fatherhood. David wanted to be Connor's father, wanted the title, wanted the biological connection. But he hasn't shown up. He hasn't done the work. He hasn't been there for the hard parts. Wanting to be a father and actually being a father are two completely different things. Today, Connor is 4 years old. He lives with Mark and knows Mark is his father. He sees Jennifer regularly and has a relationship with his mother. He's never met David, and Mark hasn't decided yet whether that will ever change. The DNA question remains unanswered and unanswerable. Connor may be Mark's biological son, or he may be David's, and the science cannot tell them which. But Mark has made peace with that ambiguity. Connor is mine, he said in a recent interview. Not because of DNA, but because I'm his dad. I'm the one who's there. That's what matters. Dr. Phil keeps a photo from that first taping in his office. Mark and David sitting side by side, identical faces, identical DNA, but completely different choices about what brotherhood and fatherhood mean. It's there to remind him that sometimes the most important questions aren't answered by science. Sometimes genetics can tell you about biology, but not about character. Sometimes two people can share the exact same DNA, but make completely different choices about honor and integrity and love. The burgundy chairs are still there in the studio. Families still come with their DNA tests and their paternity questions and their crises of trust. And Dr. Phil still opens those white envelopes, revealing answers that sometimes solve problems and sometimes create new ones. But since Mark and David and Jennifer, he listens for the deeper question underneath the paternity dispute. Not just, is this child mine biologically? But am I willing to be this child's father regardless of what the DNA says? Because that's the question that actually matters. That's the question that determines whether a child has a father or just a biological contributor. The science is clear. Identical twins share DNA so completely that a paternity test cannot distinguish between them. But the humanity is clearer. Being a father is about showing up, about choosing to love and raise a child, about commitment that goes beyond genetics. Mark chose to be Connor's father. David wanted to be Connor's father but wasn't willing to do the work or accept the consequences of his betrayal. And that difference between choosing fatherhood and simply claiming biology, that's the real answer the DNA test revealed. Not about chromosomes and genetic markers, but about character and commitment and what it really means to be a father. Connor will grow up with that question unanswered. Is Mark my biological father or is David? The science will never tell him. But he'll grow up knowing something more important, that Mark chose to be his father every single day. And the choice matters more than any DNA test ever could.